All right, I think we're just waiting for Adrian.
All right. Yeah, once she jumps on, we'll get things kicked off. Kim, how are you doing today?
Hi.
Hey.
You in live person, not just a photo.
Yeah. You get to see I'm at my place, and so the little bit better setup for what I've been able to concoct. You would laugh at the totem I've built to get my microphone to be at this point. It's a building, looks like Tetris of
So you
things
have
I
a
found.
microphone.
Um, you would honestly laugh. I'm using my yoga mat roller as a stand to hold my mic, so it's very concocted over here.
If you guys could see what was in front of me in the beautiful room it looks like I'm in, you would actually be looking at a water heater and a utility sink.
I lost myself.
Well, we got Adrian here. I think
We
that's
do.
it for today. We don't have Doug.
No, Henry's back
Henry
on
today.
his is it super secret gig? I don't think it is for the next 2 weeks.
Henry is on the super secret gig. He is a superhero, so he is.
Yes,
he's out.
Yes. Let's just say he'll be working through the next 2 weeks.
Check his socials for details.
Check his socials for details.
Yeah.
I need my glasses. I think I punked myself. Hang on, you guys. I'll be right back.
To get things rolling, now that we got Adrian here with us, we are super excited, as we are every single week, to continue the conversation of tour management and keeping it fluid and teaching anyone who's aspiring to be a tour manager or just looking to dust off their skill sets and stay fluent in the conversation and how we're growing in our field and to aspire and inspire. So today we are back in the 2.0 series, joined by some wonderful special guests who MJ will introduce. Today we are episode number 54 of Tour Management 101, and we're taking a deeper dive this fall in 2.0 sessions. So I'm going to pass it over to MJ, and we'll get Advancing 2.0 kicked off.
Hey, what is advancing? Advancing is a process that begins weeks or even months before a show or tour ever begins. It's the period of time where the tour's needs are expressed and the logistical pitfalls are worked on in order to prepare for ultimately a successful day of show. No two advances are the same. Every single one is different, even on the same tour, and they're tailored to meet the needs of the situation that you're in. So today we have, along with us discussing advancing, we have two guests. Steve Gordon is a production manager. He's worked with many, many artists, most recently Mumford and Sons, and I will let him tell us a little more about himself when we get there. And Kim Burkhart, who is a production coordinator extraordinaire on large scale concert tours. So without further ado, we are going to jump into the tour managers portion of the advance. And I'm going to start with Adrian. You have your tour set up. So we've talked about setting up the tour last week. So now how do you approach your advance as a TM when you're TMing?
I have to say, for me, and is my sound okay? Can you guys hear me all right? Good. Okay. Yep. For me, the advance is really the part of the time when I get acquainted with my tour, with the new leg, the new tour, whatever we're doing, like it's its own organism. We become friends. You sort of get the attitude of the tour. If you're looking at the routing, you're going to go, wow, this is going to be a neck breaker, or, oh, this looks really civilized. We're going to be all right. This, and then you really do begin to treat your tour. I treat it like it's an organism. It's filled with moving parts and humans. And so you begin to understand your tour like it's your friend. For me, one of the first things that I do, and I'm going to be excited when Steve Gordon shows a bit about his advance, depending on the size of the tour and how complex. My advances are generally the same, but how I put them together can vary by tour. Sometimes I'm going to do a master workbook, like what Steve is going to show. I noticed that he's got his first outreach of advance in a master workbook. And I tend to use a lot of workbooks, but my first thrust out for my advance is going to be a master email to all of my promoter reps. And it says, hello, here we come. We're excited to see you. This is the basic vibe of the tour. If there's any abnormalities or anything that's weird this time, you know, perhaps we have a traveling museum. We've had that. So if there's any anomalies, and one of the things we're going to touch on today, because we're going to look at the advance from PM production manager and from PC production coordinator, you will notice that we all are going to touch on the same points, because we're coming back and we're reinforcing. And that for me is the best way to have your promoter reps are catching a lot of tours, particularly if you're on a summer tour, their calendars are full. So you are, you know, you could be jammed in between some other or some huge shows or some people are busy. So you want to make sure that your advance is tight and you're saying the same thing over and over. I'm going to say the same thing that Steve is going to say, that's going to say the same thing that Kim is going to say. So this is the time where I introduce my staff. If I am lucky enough to have a tour accountant, a security guy, because again, this is 2.0. So we're talking about bigger tours, arenas, larger venues, potentially festivals, maybe stadiums, you know, so you are introducing your key players. You're introducing your illustrious production manager, your fabulous production coordinator. PM's going to get the PM stuff. PC's going to have the PC stuff. And it will behoove you sometimes to say, you're going to talk to Kim for this, because on different tours, different people do different things. You may have a VIP advance going on. You're going to maybe want to talk about who your tour accountant is, who your ticketing person is. Maybe if you're like me, or perhaps like Mary Jo will talk about, you are the hat wearing person on the tour that is, I'm always doing ticketing and accounting and the logistics of my A party, sometimes my B party. So this is the time where you're going to delineate who's doing what. For me, I take the advanced time to check my routing to see where my anomalies are routing wise. Is there something that's tight that we may or may not make? I'm going to want to then confirm that with my production manager. And this is the point where you're really starting to talk to your team members and seeing where the weird things are, seeing if there are things that you think you might not be able to do. You're looking down your list of door times. You know, you're just starting to figure out how you're going to talk to people and what the important things that you're going to talk about. Is there VIP? Is your VIP person on board yet? There's, you know, advancing that might have to happen in that regard. From a TM's first thrust perspective, if your rep is not on board, and maybe it's just a meet and greet situation, you know, there's a lot of variables. MJ, what do you think?
Yep. Yeah. I mean, yeah, for tour manager, usually my advance, it just depends on the tour, because sometimes if I'm working closely with, if the production manager and I are working closely together, we'll send out an initial email at the same time and just introduce everybody. Sometimes it's the production manager leading and introducing me, and then I hop in with my own thing. And like you said, it's like if we're carrying catering, if we're carrying accounting, if we have a separate accountant, if there's a VIP rep, if there's thorough security doing their own advance, I'll just introduce them and then just hand it off.
Right.
Like, I just know it's done.
And this is the time from an administrative perspective also, where I'm looking to find out, if not my promoter rep, if it's not you, who am I going to? And who am I sending my people to? Who is going to advance the catering? Do you have a caterer already? If you do, please let us know so we can send this along. Who is your financial person? Who are we going to settle with? Who is the ticketing person? Also, we're going to figure out where we are on sale at this time. Have you done your on sales yet? Are you, where in the timeline of advancing are we? I'm going to be looking for cash pickups on these days. So you may want to, kind of get ahead a little bit and see when you're doing, if anybody is still doing cash in envelope per diems, or if it's in paychecks or whatever you're doing. When do you need to have some cash? Where will that be? Don't make it a habit of popping in and saying you need to pull 15 grand in cash on the day on a Saturday.
That's not going to happen on a large scale show.
You do want to make sure that you're giving administrative folks time to do stuff. And let's keep it real. Again, you're talking about busy buildings that are in the middle of sports seasons and other shows. So don't assume you're the only kid on the block coming in and you're the most important. They got a lot going on. They're only human. So make sure, and I think one of the things that we touched on is your advance is how your day is going to go. Again, Murphy comes in and things happen and there's always a curveball or a left turn that you're not expecting. But if you're well advanced, your bottom line is laid out, your foundation is down, and you can rock a change pretty quick that way.
I think that's something as a tour accountant as well. I always say that when people say, oh, I want to learn to settle, and it's this big thing. And I'm like, really? Settlement it really shows you how good your advance was. Because if your advance was on point and everybody was communicating, you've already ironed out, ideally, all the kinks. And settlement, even on a massive show, can go really fast. I mean, honestly, on a massive show, half the time you're doing settlement like over the next couple weeks.
Along the way, yeah.
But there's no surprises, and that I always think that's my gauge of a successful advance is how nice and simple and straightforward and could we have a glass of wine while we're doing this kind of settlement, because I mean, ideally that's, and you're building a relationship, and that a good advance in working really hard on the advance will do that. And it does take a lot of time on the, on the large scale show. I wanted to ask 5-1, what do you include in yours? Because you're very detail oriented.
If I'm working along with the production manager, I just usually let them do their own advance, but there's just certain things as a tour manager that I just kind of want to have in my advance. And one of those things I always want to know in advance if there's any citywide conventions going on, if there's any sports stuff that's going on that's going to affect us either the day before or the day of our show, because that's going to affect our parking, getting in and out of the city. I also want to know, one of the most important things for me is maps and directions to the loading dock, not just to the venue, because I want to know where all my trucks and buses are going to come in, if there's shore power, and also where we're going to park our vehicles. Because like on Steve's tours, he's got a massive amount of trucks and buses. So is there going to be some off-site parking that we're going to be involved with? And one last thing is, if we are coming into a city on a day off, can we park our vehicles at the venue just to kind of save a little bit of money? Because if we are traveling with a lot of buses and you're staying at A or B party type hotels where the hotel might charge you for bus parking, can we park them at the venue just to save a few bucks there? So those are some of the things. But if I'm also the tour accountant, like you were saying, I kind of want to know, just double check ticket pricing, if there's just any kind of settlement related stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm going to refer to the notorious KIM and Steve, because I can't wait to hear their stuff, because I want to learn some stuff today.
I know.
2.0 on this on TM 101 is where we're all nerding out. We're like, ooh, we get to hear from our colleagues and see how they do it. That to me is very exciting.
And like I mentioned before, we're kind of skimming over a little bit because there are some other ancillary advances that typically on this level you will just hand off. As Adrian and 5-1 said, many of us will wear both hats and be the tour accountant on this level. It really just depends on the scope of the tour. Or for example, one tour that I did on the album cycle tour, we carried a tour accountant, but if we just went out for a week or two or in between, I would do it. So it really just, it depends. You may do that, but typically on this level, you would be handing off to security to do their own advance, VIP, accounting. And again, as Adrian said, sometimes there's overlap, but we're going to focus mainly on, tour manager, production manager, and production coordinator. So actually, we're gonna hand it off to Mark to chat with Steve.
Steve, how you doing? So I'd love to get started with you telling us a little bit about yourself, who you worked with, how long you've been in the business, and who you currently work with, and then maybe jump into tools and resources and kind of show us the ropes on how you do your advance.
Sure. Well, I've been in the business in one way or another, meaning backstage, since I was in high school. I started doing stage lighting in high school. I went to college to be a lighting designer. That was what I thought I was going to do. So I went to a theater school, got a degree in theater design technology, and then just through a course of events, I did my first concert tour in '99 as a projectionist. And I worked my way from projectionist to, I got assigned to Pearl Jam. Because I just was a vendor crew, and I got assigned to Pearl Jam, went out with them as a projectionist. 4 shows in, they got rid of they decided they didn't want the projection. And the tour manager was a guy named Dick Adams. I went in and I said, well, I guess I'm going home. And he said, well, we're sending the gear home. We're going to keep you. And so they kept me on as corner man, what they called me. I just sort of helped everybody. And the next tour was carpenter, the next tour was stage manager, and just sort of worked my way up that way to production management. I've worked with them, REM. My first production management job was the White Stripes, 2007. And then it was just like, I did a Morrissey tour. I did Florence and the Machine, a couple of Arcade Fire tours. And then Mumford & Sons, I started with them in 2013. And I've been with them for all their shows since January of 2013. So that's the short story, I guess.
All amazing clients, and such a classic story of come up from, the unexpected and working your way into something and ended up finding yourself in a position and field that you didn't necessarily think was going to happen.
Yeah, I didn't. I mean, I always wanted to, even when I was a lighting designer, I wanted to do concert lighting like that. I didn't want to do, I did theater stuff and I had to in school, but my ultimate goal, because I live in the Hudson Valley, New York, and there's a rock club here in Poughkeepsie called The Chance. And you know what? I lied to you. My first tour was actually in '93 because I was the house lighting guy at The Chance. And Dan Parisi, who unfortunately we just lost recently, very sadly, Dan Parisi was a production manager at The Chance, and he actually took me on a tour as the lighting guy / drum tech for Felix Cavallari's Rascals. It was like an East Coast, like a 1 week East Coast little like in the round theater gig. So that was my first one. But anyway, so yeah, it was. I think it was just a matter of, meeting the right people and really having some good mentors. I mean, Dick Adams was a mentor of mine. He took me out as a stage manager on REM, and he was production manager with them. And Jerry Gillen, once again, who was the PM for Pearl Jam when I was there between 2000 and 2006, I guess is when I was with them. So
I have a Dick Adams story I want to say really quick that you just reminded me of. So I was his production runner at Red Rocks when it was a couple years before I ever started touring. And I was like, I want to tour. I really want to tour. And was asking about it. We got on really, really well. They did like 4 nights there, 3 nights. And so I was with him every day. And I remember him saying to me, it's like a private club. It's really challenging to get in, but once you're in, and it's really hard to get out. But he was so supportive and really nice about touring. He's like, you'll get there. Like he taught me actually a lot of stuff in those 4 days. So fast forward, like 2 years later, I was standing in front of the Soho Grand Hotel, road managing a band. I was the assistant tour manager, and we just done like 2 or 3 nights at the Hammerstein Ballroom in New York. And we were checking out and getting ready we were just waiting for, I think, a van from a car service to take us to the airport. And up rolls Pearl Jam's party, I think crew, But I just remember he hopped out of a van and he remembered me and he was like, Mary Jo, what are you doing here? And I was like, yeah, I'm the assistant tour manager for this tour. And he was so happy for me and was like, you did it. And he was so great. But that was one of my most amazing like touring moments. And he was great. And just for those 4 days I worked with him, like such a great mentor.
Yeah. I mean, I have to honestly say, if it wasn't for him saying that to me, in London, we're going to keep you, I don't think I would have been on this career path at all. I really think that I probably would have, gone back to New York and kept working it was Production Arts Lighting at the time, who were renting the projectors that I was working with. But I mean, that just him making that decision, I think really changed my life. So
that's awesome.
So yeah.
Steve, so we've loved these conversations, and I would love to start diving into your tools, the tools you use to execute your advances. I know you did a little screen share. You have some stuff to share with our students. So
sure. Yeah.
Take us through the ropes. Love to
so I've been trying to, basically these days, I use a combination of Google Docs and Google Sheets and Dropbox. Dropbox primarily to hold on to, like the venue specs, the production packs, things like that. And then my information goes into the Google Sheets, which I share with my production coordinator, my stage manager, tour accountant. So everyone has access to it all the time, basically. So here, I'll walk you through the Google Chrome Sheets for our, I guess it was US February, March Delta tour, which was in the round. All right, can you guys see that? Did I do it right? Yeah, I don't have the.
Yeah, you had it, and then now we just have a white strip, I think. There you go.
All right, great. So basically, I call this my master file, and you'll see I've got all of these tabs along the bottom here. Start out, I've hidden all everybody's contact information, but this is, basically our staff on the road for this tour. See, it includes, everyone, the band is in here. And then even down to all the truck drivers and bus drivers and all their information is on here. And then just, bus assignments, go through and you figure out who's going to, I tend to break buses up by when they need to go to work. So I try to keep people together that have to do that. This tour, because it was in the round, I really had to have a good handle on specifically the venue details and the scoreboard's heights and dimensions, because it was a big rigging challenge. So I put together this sort of one sheet or simple list of the gigs, the venues, the power, to the very power heavy show, the scoreboard size and dimension, trim height, and then loading dock situation and the rigging height. And I just went through all the tech packs and built this little sheet here. And then, your promoter rep contact information, truck schedules, when they're going to pick up from where, when they're going to load in for rehearsals, and then, when they're going to load out, if they're anything different. I had an A rig and a B rig on this show as far as actual rigging, not like backline equipment, but an A rigging package and a B rigging package and an advanced rigging team. So those trucks obviously had different schedules, and I broke that out here that I was able to send to Upstaging, our trucking company. And then same thing here, I had to really build out the schedule because of the advance teams. So this is where we determined which rig was going to be used when the building became available, because when the show went on sale, we didn't realize we needed a pre-rig, or I didn't realize that we were going to need a pre-rig. Because the design wasn't done yet, as sometimes happens. So anyway, all that. And then I guess really what we want to get into is what I do is once I have all the information I need to give to the local promoter reps. We send a rider out, which you guys have probably talked about, I assume, previously. So, and as we've said, riders, the promoters are always screaming for a rider many times before it's actually ready, but you have to give them information to work with. It's sort of along what you're saying about the vibe of the show, what's going to, like, we knew this one was going to be in the round, right? So obviously that opens up a whole new set of things that you have to discuss. So anyway, you put the rider together. I usually get that sent out. Usually the tour manager and I will work on it together. And he'll do his part, I'll do my part, and then even the account, if we had a tour accountant, they put a little section in for them generally, and then they'll have their own documents that they just deal with, who they need to deal with on their own. So traditionally what we'll do is we'll get the riders together, all that stuff, and then there'll be an introductory email from me or tour manager. It depends on who I'm working with, who does that. I think
sometimes both.
Sometimes both, yeah.
Yep.
In this case, I think it was me because of the whole in the round thing. I just had to get so much information about the venues, the scoreboards, the seating configurations, so on. So anyway,
Steve, I have a question for you real quick. Did you find that you had to start earlier than your normal? Like, what's your normal advance window? And was the in the round, did that push it out further for you? Did you need more time?
Yes, I would say definitely. I mean, the in the round shows, they just have, I had never done an in the round show in an arena before. So this was a whole new challenge for me. I reached out to Dick Adams because he worked with Metallica for years, not as a production manager, but as tour manager, a tour accountant. And because they've been doing in the round shows for as long as I can remember. So he had a few points for me and that helped, but it was really just the advancing part of it was because the stage was getting designed, the stage design came very late. We said in our earlier call that I don't know about the artists you guys work with, but the artists that I've worked with, it's like they can't get their heads around, like, they're like, oh, we'll have a stage or something, we'll have something, it'll be cool. And then it's like, all of a sudden they're like, oh, why don't we do this? And it's like, you have a month. I mean, the construction of this set, like, I don't even know how Brilliant Stages got it done, to be honest with you, because I think they had 6 weeks or something to build this. And I'll show you here, actually, I'll finish going through this and I'll show you the seating plans that I was working on. And I found it, it's funny, you asked me about a picture. I don't know about if this happens to you guys, but I forget to take pictures. I'm so busy working and working on the show and being advancing and so on and so forth. I just went to look for photographs that I took of the stage and I can't find any because I didn't, and I know that they can be helpful in the advance. That's another thing that you can do, which I started to do later. I just can't find the folder. I may have moved it, but taking pictures of the show once it's set up, especially if it's a weird show, like an in the round show, you have things in odd places in the venue, is you can, take pictures when the house lights are on and, there's no one in there, because that really does help. And I started doing that with particularly because when you're in the round, your front of house isn't really at front of house. In my case, we always put our front of house position at the normal end stage, end of the arena, because that's where traditionally all the power is, and that's what we had. When you have to put the dimmers and everything on the floor, which they usually go under the stage or side stage. I wanted to try to keep that infrastructure as close to where it normally would be as possible. So when we would talk about front of house, you get confused, and people, I say, well, our front of house is at the end stage. So in the round just brings up all kinds of terms that you never really thought, and it could get confusing to people. So anyway, once I have the information, I build this what I call my one sheet or two sheet. And basically, the way I look at this is what needs to be conveyed to the local promoter rep that has everything that we need to have get the show done. The rider is there, but the rider, this supersedes the rider. And I'm thinking, you probably talked about how riders can be long documents that people don't read thoroughly. And so this is basically just stripping everything out and just going right down to what you need. So in my case, what I like to do is I put the vehicles and the number of vehicles, when we think we're going to be getting there, my schedule for the day. This was obviously a rehearsal day. Meal times. We were carrying our own catering, but noting one of our band members has severe nut allergy. So it's like, we always hammer this home on everything. It's like, it's in bold, bright red on the catering rider. The tour manager talks about it. I talk about it. Security talks about it. It's always there. Put in the crew calls here. These are my suggested crew calls based on sort of my generic calls. Then catering requirements. We had a band chef and a catering crew for the rest of the tour staff. Because of nut allergy, we've maintained complete separation of the two kitchens. And then the runners and catering assistants that we need. I would give them general notes here on the runners, but then Angelique, my production coordinator, would then take over from there, and she would, stay in communication, get their contact info, all that, make sure they know what their pickups are. She would also runs them during the day. I mean, runners are production coordinators deal, in my opinion, and Angelique does a great job with it. And
Angelique, by the way, visits with us on a regular basis. She's in the chat right now, and she's been a guest of ours, and we adore her. Awesome. Shout out to Ange. Hi, Ange.
Ange. And then, the power that we need where it's needed. Everyone's favorite thing, towels. They all love that.
No crunchy towels. No crunchy towels.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I go through all that. In the, I'm love to read what you guys write in your riders for towels, right? It's just like, it's always wash this, that, and it's like no one reads that or cares. So you have to hammer that home as well. Here, any stage notes. We were carrying everything, so there was nothing there. But if it was going to be a venue provided stage, I'd have the dimensions, everything in there. Any special effects requirements. In this case, it's gas for confetti and all kinds of other garbage. And then a basic list of the rooms that we would ideally like to have. Now, obviously, this is quite a big list. Some people, you can't do that. You just go in and, I didn't do much of the dressing room part. Basically, the tour manager or the assistant tour manager would sort of take care of that stuff and work on the dressing rooms. I just sort of look after the office. I just go in and make sure that what we think that they would look good on paper was actually looking good during, when we actually got there, and they didn't pick a room for the band that was horrific. You know what I mean? So, so anyway, once I have that done, I am going to. I send it to the to my promoter rep. I'm going to show you. This is the so this is what it looks like in PDF form, and this is obviously not the same one, but it gives you an idea of what it looks like. So I send it to them. We schedule a time for a call. I usually do this. I try to do this 30 days away from. I try to keep a minimum of 30 days from the show date to at least make the initial contact. And a lot of times the call won't happen until 2 weeks before, or sometimes shorter, depending on, like you said, how busy the promoter reps are, because they can only, they're just doing as best they can to keep up if it's busy in the summer. So we get on the phone, we go through this. Most of the time, I've had very positive feedback from promoter reps on these advance sheets. They tend to say, wow, I pretty much got everything I need here. We'll just go through the schedule, make sure that that what we've got here, that our door times are what it says on the ticket, which you'll be surprised at how often it's not, the information that we've been given is not what's printed on the ticket for some reason. I go through the crew calls, make sure that they feel that this, based on their venue, that it works. And then once we've gone through it all, we've agreed on everything, I'll revise it and I'll send them a version 2. And if we have to revise it again, version 3, so on and so forth. So, I mentioned that I was doing the In the Round show. So here's a photograph of the original design of the show. So this is right in the middle, and you can see that the staging goes up and into the seats. That presented quite a challenge in the advancing part of it, in figuring out sightline restrictions.
Steve, I have a quick question. Is this the long end of, are you playing to the short? Are you playing to the short or the long end? You running all the way up and down the middle with this? I'm just curious, what way is the stage facing?
Let me share a drawing because it'll make more sense. Okay, so.
Oh, wow, you're right. Okay, wow.
So this is the Boston Garden, right? So this is normally where the stage would be. I don't know how many of your students have seen seating plans like this or not, but
in ticketing, yeah. But this is why we advance, because what do you see happening here? You see that the stage is going to eat up how many? What are we talking about? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, potentially coning into maybe 10 rows of seats.
Yeah, exactly. So this is the way we're playing. So we're playing across the arena. Like I said, this is where the stage would normally be, and that's where we put our front of house position.
Wow.
And let me share the section view so you get an idea of. So this is the section view. So this is looking basically as if I was standing at the front of house, our front of house position, or the normal stage side, looking towards the stage. So that's a band member right there. And then you see it steps up here. And there's a path under there for people to cross from one side of the arena to the other. And then it steps out and goes and lands in the seats out here. So I had to do, so in this case, I'm going to go back to the other drawing. We had to just make sure that we weren't selling seats that had obstructed views, or if we were selling them, they were noted as such when they were sold. And so that's basically what this hashed red area is here. I went in and I got I basically went into a CAD program and drew sight lines, and this is what I worked on with our tour accountant who was doing the ticketing and the on sales. And we would figure out what these blocks were for all the different venues that we're going to be in. So
this is a perfect example of one of those things where it's a non-traditional setup, and you're not even really properly in the round. You're fully cutting the arena in half.
Yeah.
And taking out some seats, normally because and so do you have standing room on the floor now, or are you seated?
No, it's all GA on the floor.
And
is that behind
Steve,
you as well? Sorry about that, 5-1.
I was just going to ask Steve, where is the monitor mix? Is it underneath the stage?
Yes. So
Okay.
all the text and all of the monitors are built underneath, but basically only into because this. So basically, they all had to fit. If I can annotate on here, hang on a second. Yeah, they all had to fit in there and in there, because this was where the audience walked through underneath the stage.
Right.
So when we were designing this, this doesn't really have much to do with advancing, I guess this is more of just, but when we were designing this, I actually measured, we measured everything about all the work cases that the text used, everything that had to go under there, and specifically built the structure so that we could fit the workstations in there. It was.
I just want you guys to know that I have watched Steve on a tour put all the dimensions of the cases in CAD. Was it CAD or Vectorworks? And plan all this stuff, and it's really quite impressive.
Very impressive.
He was planning
Very
the truck
impressive.
pack on the tour I was doing with him.
And
but
you
I've
and you
seen other
basically
things.
the techs also, they've got to have sight lines to the band. I mean, guitar tech's got to be able to see his guy, monitor guy has to be able to see. So they've got to be down in their cubbies, but they've got to have sight lines. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if you can see it. Yeah, here, let me go back to the photograph here real quick. So in the photograph, you can see that we had this drum kit over here, and the monitor desk was underneath. Like, I think actually the monitor desk was over here under this kit, and he was under, and then every guy has a tech. I mean, there's it was insane. I think there were 11 or 12 people under there.
Oh, very cool.
But
so this is what you were advancing.
yeah, that's
Very
so
cool.
it just gets, and then add on top of that, so that's what's on the ground. Then we have to talk about what's in the sky, and that's all the rigging, and that was quite a challenge. And I'll save that for a different discussion. But let's just say that I think rigging is probably one of the most important things that you do advance as a production manager. And I work very closely with my head rigger, obviously, and we really, especially in a show in the round, you need to get that out as soon as possible, because you are dealing with scoreboards and scoreboard weights now, and we knew that we were going to be dealing with the scoreboard, so we specifically designed a trussing system that would allow us to basically rig in Madison Square Garden, which means you have to leave a 50-foot square in the hole in the middle of anything you're going to do, because that's basically it used to be the biggest one you'd run into, that doesn't retract, doesn't go out of the way. But you're always fighting with weight issues, because you're putting, a lot of buildings are built to have, they have increased capacity at the normal stage end. And they have less capacity out in the center, where the weight's already been taken up by the scoreboard. So you really need to get that out. And we had load cells on the show. We carried load cells with us. We weighed the show in rehearsal. We weighed it anytime there was a change made, and we knew, because it was important that we had that right.
Steve, can you tell us a little bit about how your design changed mid-tour, and how the kind of the philosophy of less is more, and how you're able to kind of get that across to your artist, and just how things changed around that on the design front?
It just was a matter of, so we did that design, was the UK tour, and a run of dates in the US in December. And then our next leg was in Australia, and it was just way too expensive for us to bring that set to Australia. So we switched to an end-on configuration with a thrust and a B stage, and the band would go out. Because the whole idea of the design, the whole idea was to get them as close to the audience as possible. And that was the whole concept of putting the stage out into the seats like that. But I think we found that because of some of the limitations of the sight line restrictions, because we were actually in the seats like that we couldn't actually get people that close to them in the seats, and it may have felt a little more exclusive than inclusive. And so after they experienced the end stage with the thrust and a small B stage, sort of almost to where the scoreboard would be, where our in the round stage was, we just sort of had some conversations about how good it felt and how inclusive they felt and so on and so forth. And it was just over conversation, it was decided that maybe we can take what we've learned in that configuration and apply it to the stage back in the States, and sort of take it as those what we call them screamers, or what we called the steps went into the audience. What happens if we get rid of those? Because which is the one thing you can do once you've put a show on sale is you can increase the capacity, but you can't decrease it. So if they wanted to make the stage bigger, that wouldn't have been possible. But since we were able to, and we basically just focused it right down to that center section, and they found, I think that's when everything really caught its groove, and they made the day go a little smoother, just from a sheer, amount of work perspective, because it was a challenge to build those things.
I feel like this is a perfect segue before I pass over to Adrian. Can you tell us a little bit about just your thoughts on spending more time on the advance and how that makes our show run so much smoother, is by being very detail oriented and putting more time into the advance to simplify our day. We'll always run through our battles on a day-to-day basis, but having the importance of having a very, very detailed oriented advance is super important.
Yeah, I agree. And I've spent, I think we're all sort of I think any of us that do this are probably all sort of the people who I know this is a weird analogy, but love being in stationery stores, being at Staples and really, really enjoy it. So I'm constantly trying to find the best way to present the information. You know what I mean? And it's like that sort of one sheet that I do. It's taken me a long, there's been so many versions of that before I finally arrived to that version. And I'm always changing it, but I'm always trying to find the clearest way to present information, and also the most efficient way to share it, especially with my team, or the tour team, I should say. So I do a lot, my typical email to the promoter rep is usually it's, that, hey, how's it going? Good, hope, I'm sure it's usually looking forward to seeing you again. And it's a link to a Dropbox with all of our production information, the riders, the stage plot, stuff. They've already been sent a rider, but it's just the whole thing all over again. And it's a Dropbox folder that has all of the information, radio frequencies, everything basically. And then that one sheet. And then, if I haven't heard back from them, if I haven't heard back from them in a while, I'll touch base again. But just getting that information to them and to make their jobs easier too. Like having all that information on two pieces of paper, really makes their jobs easier. Because they all have their spreadsheets and where they fill in the numbers, and it's just like they go, okay, well, here's the schedule. Okay, what are the set times? Oh, it's this. It's like it's all right there for them, and it just makes, like I said earlier, the phone calls are just become so efficient because it's like, yeah, I got your sheet. I think I'm good. It's like usually most of the things we spend time talking about are when you were saying the sort of weird things. Like in our case, the first weird thing was where the stage was, and where front of house was. So clearing all that up, and then also spending time on we had the whole band chef versus tour chef, touring caterers. That was always, because most venues only have one dedicated space for touring, for any caterer to come in. So our band chef, as they always do, all touring caterers are heroes in my mind. But the band chef, boy, he had to work in some pretty dodgy places, man.
Hello, pop-up tents. 10 by 10 tent, the 1,000,001 uses for a pop-up tent.
Yeah, and voting rooms, because he had to have water. He needs to have access to water. He needs to have, and to top everything else off, we purchased his equipment at the beginning of the Wilder Mine tour, which was a record ago, and it's all from the UK. So when we bring it over here, I also have to bring a transformer to power his equipment. So it's
Steve, thank you so much. This has really been fascinating, and particularly because you literally brought us in advance on something that is in itself an anomaly. It not only was really kind of a 360 in the round, but you literally plunked down a stage on some seats, and so this is a really good argument for why you've really got to advance. Yeah. Thank you for joining us. It was fascinating, and I appreciated seeing your master workbook. I'm a fan of that, and I, you know, in the last couple of years on the bigger tours, have definitely started a master workbook. That way, I know where all my pertinent information that stays open, and I'm just tabbing along the bottom to get to things.
Yeah. And sharing it with everybody on the tour. I don't know about you, how you guys feel about master tour. I'm not really a fan. I don't really use it.
Some do, some don't. Yeah, some do, some don't. It's really a matter of
House divided.
Yeah, what your technology preferences are. So thank you so much. And now it's my esteemed pleasure, my heartfelt pleasure, to introduce my friend, Kim Burkhart, friend and colleague who I've had the pleasure of knowing and working with for quite a while. She's quite impressive. She's worn a number of hats in this business, and that gives her a really, really well-rounded purview as she approaches advancing and things like that. So Kimmy girl, welcome. And can you tell, for those folks who are maybe not aware of who you are and what you might have done in the past, can you flesh that out a little bit for us?
Well, I'm still geeking out about Steve's stage, and I mean, that is really impressive. And I think that is sort of a telling tale where you have all these, people who've worked with some of the biggest names in the music business that were all like, oh my God, look at that stage. Look at, it's amazing. So
last week we geeked out with Elliot Saltzman talking about TSO and the stages at the other two ends. This week you got us, Steve, with the thing in the middle. That was perfect.
Amazing. So I started out working for a small independent promoter ages ago. We out of Detroit, and we partnered with Cellar Door with Gary Meyer and John Itzel and Rick Franks ages ago. And then I moved on to a booking agent in New York for a while. And then I wanted to try my hand at touring. So that was probably, mid 90s-ish. Did tours with like Jimmy Pettinato so long ago. I kind of just been doing that. I kind of go in between, mostly production coordinator. I started getting into a little bit of faux wardrobe, I call it, because I'm not wardrobe. Yeah. I'm not a seamstress, so I can't do that. And then in the last couple of years, I have been getting pulled over into the VIP land because I felt like I got asked to fill in for something, and I was like, oh wait, this is kind of like a show within a show within a show, and this needs a whole lot more advancing than what was happening that I saw. So I kind of pick up a lot of those tours that I'm advancing. Those shows might be sending somebody out to do the actual show, but I'm still advancing all of them to get through. Last couple years I feel like when you guys called me, I was like, I don't even remember how to advance shows. It's been so long.
It's so fun.
But really, my stuff starts with, after the production manager has sent out his info and made that actual call versus just sending it out. Sometimes they send back a one sheet like Steve has, or can go to a Dropbox, which is amazing. And then I start my stuff. I pull out from the rider, probably hospitality for sure, dressing rooms for sure. I mean, I shouldn't say that. Every tour is different, obviously, and I feel like that's a repetitive statement as well. Every tour is different. So
right, and I want to just take a moment here to mention, as Kim is talking about breaking out the rider, The rider is almost like a book of lies. It's a big thing. It has a lot of information. But what ends up happening in the advance process is all of these positions will basically take their chunks of the rider and break them out into much more manageable PDFs that pertain to their area. So that when Kim is dealing with her counterpart, she's dealing specifically with catering and dressing rooms in one document, because the ticketing and the security and things like that, the caterers don't need that stuff. Security needs their security document. Production manager is going to work on the tech stuff. TM is going to take the ticketing and the accounting and go there. So let's work off of that idea moving forward. Is that at a certain point, you're breaking it, you're chunking it down to pieces of information, and the person who is responsible for that department goes and sorts it.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. And, definitely the thing that, I keep wanting to put out there is that while we are all separate, there's so much stuff that connects, like door times, your security director, your VIP, your production manager, all need to be in the house, need to be aware if time changes, if you're letting someone into the venue early, if it's raining out, sometimes they let people in early, etc. So all that stuff is important to keep throughout.
And is it real doors? Is it doors to the arena or doors to the concourse? And are there two different things?
That's right.
Ask the questions. Ask the questions.
Really, it is. And so yeah, once we kind of determine, who at the venue I'm actually talking to, I certainly probably am not going to talk to a Brady Campbell about catering. It's going to be somebody else. And that sometimes takes a couple emails down. But I do exactly what Steve does. I send out the big blast first, and then I start dialing in each venue, making sure I am talking to the correct caterer, maybe the correct person doing dressing rooms. The day before, I'm getting maybe the runners' phone numbers and contact information and Wi-Fi codes before I get in, and it's not 6:30 in the morning and people are getting off the bus going, "Where's the catering and the internet?" So I'm getting that together, and then I do, when I start breaking down hospitality, I mean, I'm terrible at it because I eat like an 8-year-old child. So I really have to, I print out just a blank calendar from, my mail program or my calendar program. And I will write out like, oh, we're doing roast beef and whatever this week. I lean heavily on local caterers as to what's their best dish, because I don't want to, try and make them do something they're not comfortable doing. If they've got something great, if I'm in an area of the country that is, known for something, I want to take advantage of that for sure. But I do keep just a quick little calendar so I don't double down and have to hear, oh, we're eating green beans again. Yeah, we are. And then, what else were we talking about? Oh, the travel. That was the other part too. So at this point, we would have already gotten the list of hotels that are booked. And typically, just like the production advance, I like to go behind the travel agent once they've sent over. They might send over a generic rooming list if I haven't really dialed down, if our crew isn't really dialed down, or if we've, made some changes. I get CC'd with the salesperson, and then I take over from there, from the travel agent.
And when you're going and doing your hotel advance, who are you asking to be copied in?
Yeah, so I mean, when it comes from the travel agent, she'll CC the salesperson, which is typically not the person I'm dealing with, obviously.
Right.
Sometimes it is, which is great. But I'll send my rooming list to the salesperson, but then the week before and definitely the night before, I'll say, who's the manager on duty? The front desk manager, because there's lots of managers in a hotel, so you want to be specific.
Right.
I do try and get, who else might be working that shift, I did learn from the lovely Diane Ecourse from Metallica.
Lady Di.
Yep. She will definitely get on that phone and say, I'd like to hear the keys jingling in the phone, please. And literally because they would say, oh, the keys are ready. The keys are ready. You'd get there and there's no keys. And you're like, wait, what? We just had this conversation. What's happening? Done my advance. Why didn't you do your pre-work, you know? So yeah, you definitely want to get who's going to be at that front desk, who you're dealing with, who's the actual person you're talking to. And then I also, in my rooming list, it has, you know, what the charges are for the day. So if the TM or whoever you deal with is asking, you know, for a ballpark of what those hotel rates or bills going to be for San Diego, whatever, I already know that in advance because I've already put that in my rooming list. And that, you know, that rooming list goes out the night before to the hotel. Hey, and what I also do is have them print out what's in their system and send back to me so I can match it. If that makes sense, you know, they have their
you definitely want to get, and I have to say, just to make sure that everybody understands how important you have your production and show advance, and then you have your travel advances. Ladies and gentlemen, these travel advances are important. Otherwise, it's a surprise party every single day. You could show up and what Kim is referring to is called a delegates list. You get what the hotel has for you back from them, and you A/B it against their list so that when John Smith walks up into the hotel, there's no missing keys for him, or somehow there's an anomaly and he's not coming in on the same day as the rest of the party.
Right.
I have had situations where, and listen, we're dealing with humans, folks, right? So perhaps the person who receives the rooming list enters the wrong day, makes a mistake, has your party showing up tomorrow on the calendar, not today.
Yeah.
Right. So a part of the advance process is making sure that the people that you are dealing with, your partners in this endeavor, in this juggernaut across whatever continent, has your information and has processed it correctly.
Well, and also we do a lot of, well, not a lot of, but sometimes there could be a crew change and you might have John Smith at the beginning of the tour, but it might switched over because he had to go to a different tour, and you might get, you know, Jim Roberts, you know what I mean? So you want to make sure those name matches. So if you, for whatever reason, if you're not handing out keys, if they're going to the desk by themselves, you have the correct person and that your bill's correct, because
right,
the 3 rooms that you canceled aren't still on your bill. And now you've already moved on. It's harder to fight that, you know.
Right. Kim, I also wanted to just get your feel for timing. We heard from Steve about, you know, sort of he's got that 30-day desire to hit a mark for his first thrust in advancing, and then what he likes to see on the follow-up as far as needling it down with specific documents. Can you tell us how you like to do your timelines?
Yeah, so pretty much kind of the same. You know, my stuff really can't happen until the Steves have done their work. It's kind of, you know, it's just information sitting there until, you know, the production manager has set out load in times, crew calls. We need to know what those numbers are for catering. You know, so really until he's done his actual phone conversation or just confirmation that, you know, you're both in agreement of what's going on. So I will send out a blast about 30 days before if I'm lucky enough to get on that tour early enough. You know, obviously if you're doing amphitheaters, some of them might not be open for the season yet that early, and you might have to wait for them to start. I have had stuff where I'm sending, especially VIP for amphitheaters, and they're like, we're not even here yet. Like, come back to us in May. And I'm like, oh, let me just send it. And then about 2 weeks, you know, I want to make sure that I know what's happening. We've spoken to, you know, each other. We're agreement. We have everything. And then the week of, you know, like I said, I'll check back and see if I can get confirmed runner numbers, phone numbers.
Right. I was just going to ask you about the runners. Are you advancing runners, or does your PM do that, or how does that work?
Yeah. So in just like Steve's advance there, I mean, the budget for runners is above my head. So I don't really sometimes get to decide how many that I want, because I would take them all. But the production manager would advance the runners, and then he just hands them over, or she hands them over. I need a she. Somebody step up and be a she, please. Spare me if you're a
I would
she.
love to know. I haven't worked with any
I know.
women production managers on this
there, hire
level.
Yeah, so the production manager would
Should add.
typically, that comes in that's a budget thing, so it's above my head sometimes. But then I'll take them over in the morning.
Amazing. Very
Yeah.
cool. And let me see, I think we had just one other question for you. I want to just touch on the fact, and I think it's important that everybody knows that the same information is being sent by all of the department heads, right? So the tour manager is sending out information. The production manager, the rider's going to go out. It's going to say what it says. It's going to have its asks. And then each individual department does their breakout. And so the important thing is that everybody is reiterating the same bits of information, the same plans, the same protocols. And it's also the point where everybody starts to get their eyes on things. Somebody might notice that the door times are not matching somewhere. Do you know what I mean? So the advance time is where everybody is knocking on all of the, you're kicking the tires on the tour, you're knocking on things, you're trying to see, you might be playing the devil's advocate and see where the rough spots are. The more you can find out at this time. So what are the most important things, Kim, for you from a production coordinator point of view that the TM and PM work out prior to you being able to finish your job effectively?
Well, and we talked about this a little earlier, just how important it is. Just like Steve brought up his PC. She always says very lovely things about you, Steve. But you have to have a good rapport with the person you're working for, and know that if a promoter is advancing with the TM or PM, or talking, they generally will talk several times through before you get there. And there's a question asked that is not something that maybe that production manager takes care of, like catering or whatever. Like, it's important for me for the Steves to say, hey, you need to talk to Angelique. I'm not going to get in that mix, because I feel like, well, he probably knows the answer. It's important that, Angelique gets to answer that question and know that information, because sometimes maybe, then Steve's going to walk on the deck and, who knows if it gets whatever. So I think that is just super important to point out, hire people that you trust and work with people you trust that can do the job, so you don't have to then wear every hat. You know what I mean? Delegate. So for me, to answer your question, Adrian, like definitely the door times, what crew you're having, if you need a meal break, if it's weird that I don't catch, we might have to have that lunch a little bit early to catch an early show labor call, so we're not in a meal penalty. Making sure you're checking with your production manager before you cut that meal break, so you're not screwing him over either. The rest of the stuff, the stuff that comes for me is just having like the right contact and really just having that support of that person that I'm working for. I know that I can confidently answer a question because my production manager is going to support me and what I'm doing. As far as their advance, I really feel like it's just talking, introducing your team, saying, hey, for security, you're going to talk to this guy. For, yada, yada, you're going to talk to this person, and just be that sort of top down uniform response from the tour.
Right. Right. And for me, I feel like the advance doesn't ever really stop. You're like, maybe the last 10 or 15 days, you can feel like you're fully advanced, because you're still, as you're moving into hotels and with catering, and look, particularly with hospitality and catering, people's minds change. The artist's dressing room writer will ultimately change. Things will adjust. And again, to Kim's point, you know, you might find that there's a bit of a work project at a show, and the departments are going to have to do something production-wise that may delay their meal break. Maybe we know suddenly there's a weather issue. Suddenly, you know, you're going to hit a storm. You know, you might be touring in the winter. You're going to hit a storm on the way in. You're going to be late, or something is happening. You've got a weird loadout and there's only 2 trucks in the dock and you're going to be slow. So you're going to leave late. So you're going to show up later. So these are the things that begin to happen over the life of the tour that because you're kind of still advancing as you go along. And even if you're just throwing it out to Chris Zippé, who you might see 3 times in a year, Zippy, coming in on Thursday, everything cool, just so that you're continuing to have your hands on it from a functionality standpoint to see if anything weird has popped up. Thank you guys very much. I think we can look through some questions at the moment. Let's see.
I was just going to also add that, you know, you're advancing, as you, part of what you were saying is that you're constantly advancing. It doesn't stop once you hit the road. Like people think, you know, that's the one thing that people may not realize is that, well, everybody else gets a day off on a day off. We do not. We are usually
advancing.
Advancing. Yeah.
Right. Or following up, or doing housekeeping. Yeah.
And also things change as the tour goes along. So it's in flux. It's always in flux. And in fact, Elise asked on here what happens about figuring out in the questions, which I sort of answered, anomalies, like how do you know? And I had said, well, you know, once you get done building the tour, you know it so well, it kind of informs your advance. But I think, as Steve pointed out, you can be on a tour and the design changes halfway through the tour. So I'm sure you had to did you have to re-advance those, or had you just not advanced that far out and you were sort of in flux with it?
I had to do, I had reached out, I had to do some pretty major, I mean, it was a big deal. Like I said, not in a, it was good that we were adding capacity, you know, I mean, what ended up happening actually is, I think that we broke some attendance records in several venues because the stage was so small and we were in the round.
Right.
So we actually we're doing really, really well. But it was, I'd say it was probably a re-advance. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the important thing to know about advancing is that how well and thorough you advance will inform how your day is, how that show goes. Also, advancing doesn't stop when the tour starts. Just because, you know what I mean? It goes all the way until you have completed that last show. There's just still things, you know, and again, like we keep covering, this is an organic, moving thing with lots of parts and people, and things happen. So, you know, you have to be able to adjust. And all of the adjustments that you have to make are going to happen inside of the advance. At some stage of the advance, it may not be the first wave of the advance, but there you are. So that was tangential to Elise's question.
Do we have any more questions from the?
I would like to note, I really like that 30-day window too, and just for our students to recognize that these venues are advancing a lot of shows. Their schedule could be multi-verse between sports, music, you name it, whatever's going through these venues, and you have to be very cognizant of that. I really like that 30-day window to at least just touch base, even if it's going to be a week or later that you're able to get into it. At least you've set a foundation that, like, we're present. We want to get this call done. Here's the base fundamental information you need. Writer, that's through your agency, et cetera, your base foundational writer, and then come back with, like, this is how things have developed and this is what is current now.
And let us know if you see anything weird.
Yeah. Kim, I see you
I
raising your hand.
You know what? I just have one comment to make because I do, work on the promoter side sometimes as well. And you would be really surprised how many tours don't reach out at all. Like not even like a hello. And it's like, sir, you are doing maybe an amphitheater, or I mean, it's not just like a club show you can roll up into at noon. Like
Yeah.
there's a lot of, can we just call people back? Call them
I
back.
get that, Kim. Yeah, because I've worked as a promoter rep here in Atlanta. And one of the things that we had spoken about on one of our previous episodes is how many riders or advance sheets that we get that don't have any person's contact details, who the name of the band is. So you have to be Inspector Gadget to figure out, okay, so this person's name, I think that they're out with Metallica, or are they out with Slipknot now? You have to figure it out. So back to our old episode, put your name on everything. Put your contact details on every page, please.
And name
because-
And
your
make sure-
files. Name your
Yes.
files.
Yeah, name
Something
your
that someone
files.
can identify.
Actually this is my rule of thumb is you want to start out with the band. Because in your world, if you're touring, you're thinking about it by dates. But if you're a promoter rep, when I was promoter repping, not only was I advancing my shows, the way that the promoter I worked for worked was that I also advanced a good chunk of the junior rep shows for them. So I was getting like 5 shows in a day. Like I would be advancing 5 shows for the same day. So as a promoter rep, you want to know the band name first, and then the date, and then the venue.
Right.
So it's like, so that would be my suggestion. And I liked to see files named the same way, or you could put date first. But generally, if somebody say an email pops up on a phone, you're only going to see sort of the first half of the subject. So you want to get the date and the band name in there. Then you can put the other stuff like the venue.
So I have a question. I have a question for the notorious KIM and Steve. So do you guys also, when you're sending out an updated version, do you also have somewhere on your sheets updated as of this particular day, so that a promoter rep or whoever knows that this is the latest and greatest version that you guys are sending?
I do a I use one of those stamp things, as of, and usually if it's a major change, you know what I mean. So yeah.
Yeah, I tend to do that with revisions to catering writers as well. Hey,
Do
Blue
you highlight?
Johnson. No,
Do you
sorry, go ahead.
highlight? Do you highlight what that actual change is on this new update?
I have. I wouldn't say I do it every time, but it's a good habit to get into for sure. Once again, making their jobs easier for them. You know what I mean? That's what really what we're trying to do with all of this advancing. I will say, I don't know how many of you have ever advanced production for Madison Square Garden. Has anyone ever? Okay, Dave. So that is the most unique advanced experience you'll ever have, because you have nothing to do with it. You just basically they call you. They say you need to be on your phone call on Tuesday at 3:00 in the afternoon.
Local 1 is going to take over.
And then that's it.
Yeah.
At that point, you just need to know all the facts about your tour. How many trucks, what's in them, and everything else, and how much power you need, but everything else they'll tell you.
Right. That's so funny. Hey, Steve, Blue Johnston had a question about where in your center stage config, where was Dimmer Beach?
Well, it was actually, see, now this is where advancing comes in. It was always in the, as I said, we tried to put our mix position at the normal end stage of the arena.
Right.
So I'm going to actually share that, or attempt to share that drawing again. All right, so we would put it, they would be either in these bombs under here, if there was enough room. And essentially we had cable bridges. I should have had a rigging plot pulled up for you guys. But so we had cable bridges that ran down and would then drop off into these aisles as best we could. The ones wouldn't go to the floor. And then it depended on, a lot of times, so this was before we'd ever done a show, this advance. So I ended up taking, this barricade never ended up being like this because it wasn't necessary, because the retractables were in, this row is up here. So what it ended up being was just going straight across. And then so we put dimmers in here, in this area, and in this area. The audio, all the amp racks for the PA were actually flown up next to the center hang speakers, which you can't see here, but.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
We do feats of magic. We really do. That's so impressive. Thank you so much, Steve. Anybody else? JP had a question. How long to ask for in terms of advancing at each level of touring? I think, JP, that comes with a little bit of intuition. You look at the size of your show and you can basically, with experience, you figure out how long is that going to take. I would have to say for me, regardless of the type of tour, if I can just start to advance 30 days out, even with my first thrust, even if I don't particularly have all of my information dialed in, I know that I'm comfortable talking to people at 30 days. And then once you do that, hi, how you doing? Let's get on your radar. Then you begin to have dialogues with your individual markets and you move on from there. So I like to start at 30 days, regardless really of what I'm doing. That's just me. Gives us enough time. And that's in whatever, and I have to just go back and say for me, whatever position I've done, I like 30 days. Whether it's TMing, PC, doing a ticketing situation or doing VIP, 1 month out, a hello at the least, I think is good practice. I hope that answers.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say that there's a big difference in when a show is brand new, right? So like for the Delta tour, right? It's in the round and it's being designed. Like it's still like the band is still going through concept drawings, but they want to get the show on sale, right? Because like I said, things in this industry, you'll find that for some reason, like we're super organized and ready on top of it and ready to be efficient. However, sometimes some of the artists that we work with, they're artists. So they don't do things efficiently. They do them, as they strike them. And a lot of times that doesn't give you nearly as much time as you'd like to do any of this, to be quite honest. But I think that as you do more and more of it, you start to see that there are ways that you can anticipate what the show is going to need before you know exactly what it's going to need. And that just comes like, now I've done an in the round show. Boy, do I know a lot about in the round shows now, just from the mistakes that I made. And I asked, I did the best I could, but once again, like sometimes this design phase, some bands build tours like for, I don't know, 5-1, like they start thinking about it a year or 2 years out, right? And they're building sets, all this type out. I'm talking like Coldplays and U2s and things like that. And that was sort of where this in the round show, that was the level that we were trying to go to. I think Stu Fish designed it, who do U2, but it was such a compressed time frame. It really was, and that made it extra challenging. So a lot of just like, really like, as soon as you have your lighting design, right, you figure out how much power it needs, because you need to know, like, okay, if the guys design something that you need to get generators for at every building, you've got to go back to them and say, look, you need to get into this, and we need to bring this into some place where we're not spending more money on infrastructure, things like that. So same thing, you start learning truck packs and stuff like that. It's all stuff that, Mary Jo talked about me putting flight cases into Vectorworks. It's true, because you'd be amazed, like for some production managers and stage managers, packing trucks can be, when you haven't done it the first few times and you haven't got, because I don't know, you guys probably do know that everything goes in and out of a truck in the same place every time. I assume that you guys discussed that already. But it takes a while to get that Tetris puzzle right. If you do it in Vectorworks in 3 dimensions, I can go into I can hand my stage man, and actually I taught my stage manager, Tico, to use Vectorworks, and now he does it on his own. I don't have to do it anymore. But I could hand him a loadout pack for every truck that I knew would fit before we had ever done our first loadout. And that is a very comforting feeling, I have to tell you. Because
also, I was going to say with that, it was also really comforting when I was working with you in a couple tours and you did that. I was like, oh, this is great, but I remember on one tour, like you actually helped us stay in one truck when we thought we would have to go, because we had to order some new cases and we were able to decide on the size of the case that would work. And there was no guesswork. So that's such a great money saving and time saving thing.
Yeah, I think one of the best tools that I gave myself was learning how to use Vectorworks. Just because it helps me in so many different ways. The big one being doing things like that, but also like, someone asked about the scale drawings. And so Vectorworks is a more user-friendly version of AutoCAD, which is the industry standard sort of CAD, computer-aided drafting program. Vectorworks is just a little easier to use, and it has a specific modules built for our industry. So it has, most designers, lighting designers use it to draft a plot. So I now am working with them and getting their information in its native language, and then I can build my stage plots in there. I can do, sightline drawings. I can do truck packs. I can do parking plans. I can do, when we were working in, I can do site plans. I was going to say, when we were working in South Africa, we were working with some very young promoters, and we were doing some shows in unconventional sites in Cape Town and Durban and Pretoria. And they were doing these site plans in like SketchUp, like nothing to scale. And it was just like, and this is one of those things. So here's a big red flag thing. So we were doing our UK, it was December of 2016. We were doing our UK sort of November, December tour, sort of arena tour. And then the shows in South Africa are going to happen, I think, like second week of January. And like I've been advancing, and this is in South Africa, right? So this is when you get into really weird stuff, when you don't have the sort of infrastructure that you have in the UK and Europe. Well, it's not, I would say the UK. Don't want to get Italy and Spain involved in this too much, no offense, but it can be challenging there as well. But beautiful places. When you get into other, South America, where the equipment isn't as good, the transportation isn't as good, it gets really challenging and that was one of those things where I was not getting any confident responses back from them. We had an advance call one day between management, me, and the promoters. It was about a 4-hour phone call. And when that phone call ended, I said, I have to go to South Africa, like tomorrow. And they agreed. And actually, that's when I hired Jerry Gillen. And Jerry and I finished, I had like 3 days left on that tour. And instead of flying home the 3 days before Christmas, I flew to South Africa. And Jerry and I spent 3 days in South Africa doing site visits to all those sites. And I ended up doing the site plans for most of those.
I have a question. It's something that we talked about yesterday, really quick, about site visits. And I asked you if you had done any site advance visits with that monster middle stage deal.
I didn't, because I didn't have time. I mean, literally.
I'm curious to ask you in closing, because we're in that time frame, but really quick, in closing, when do you think you have, what is it that compels you to need a site visit?
Well, in that case, it was literally because we didn't know where things were going to go. Like they couldn't convey to us that. I know some production managers do a site visit for every show they're going to do. I think it depends on the complexity of the tour and of the production itself. I believe that like that U2 tour with the one that had the LED wall going up and down the arena, that it just barely fit in a lot of places. I think that there were probably a lot of site visits done for a production like that, where you really just want to make sure everything's happening.
Well, this has just been such a wonderful conversation. I know I say this every single week, but this is definitely one of my favorite webinars to date. I know every single week we get to nerd out and talk about this stuff, so we love it, and we're thankful for you, Steve, Kim, for joining us today and giving us your insight and knowledge to how you run your advance. Thank you for everyone that was with us and joined us today. Next week we will be tackling budgeting 2.0, joined by some special guests. Keep an eye out for that. We'll be announcing all of that info coming up soon as we get closer to the weekend. Happy Halloween to everyone who's celebrating Halloween this weekend. It's landed on a Saturday, so
Be safe.
Isn't this whole year
everyone
Halloween?
stay safe.
Yeah.
What were you saying?
This whole year is Halloween and Groundhog Day in one.
Hand sanitize your hands before you go grab candy. I'm just kidding. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful week. We'll see you next Monday, same time. And as always, if you have any questions, you can reach out to us on all of our socials, and we'll have updates for y'all this week on next Monday. So see you soon.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Bye.
Leave us out,
Thanks,
y'all.
Steve and Kim. Thank you.